everybody. Beau James here with the very first episode, Outlaws to Independents. And we're going to explain on this very first episode what an outlaw is, where they come from, and how it's changed over the years when it's connected to the pro wrestling profession. And if you don't know who I am, for the last 4 decades, I have been very involved in professional wrestling. Promoter, wrestler, TV producer, referee, ring crew, popcorn maker, ticket taker. I have did every job in this profession, and I was an eyewitness to history of how it changed from the outlaws to the independents. I was an eyewitness to several generations of independent wrestlers now, and I worked with the very first generations of independent wrestlers at some point in my life. So I am probably the most qualified person to talk about this subject. And I've been working on this project for some time. And I've been looking for a co-host. I've been looking for somebody. I've had people offer to be my co-host. I've had people message me that I know and don't know once I made public that what we're working on and what I want to do with this program, and none of them fit what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody with the outlaw spirit. I was looking for somebody that was a renegade, somebody that would have fit in outlaw wrestling back in the days when I started and before. And I searched high and low, and I just could not find the right person for the job until I made a trip to Waterloo, Iowa. And I found the person that I'm getting ready to introduce you to through a mutual friend. And I've known of this co-host for a long time, and he co-hosts another podcast with a dear friend of mine. And as I met this man, I was told by my friend Al Getz, he's all right, so he's all right with me. But when I saw him spit snuff out as he was eating a deep dish pizza and was telling Al Getz what he thought about a man across the room and the horse that he rode in on, I knew right then this is the guy that I need for this podcast, because he's got the outlaw spirit. He's a wild man. He might be little, but he's wiry. Mr. John Boucher. How are you doing, John?
Wow, that's a great introduction. Thank you, Bill. I'm doing very well. I hope I can live up to that introduction, is all I can say. I have done none of what you have done. I'm a man on the outside looking in. I am, and I will always consider myself primarily a wrestling fan. I've been as long as you've been involved in the business, I've been watching from I'm watching that TV. Been watching wrestling for 40, what year is it now? 2020, 43 years. 81 I watched my first TV wrestling match, and our backgrounds are very different. I grew up in the Northeast, so I was primarily WWF kid. And now I do a lot of, still watch a lot, do a lot of collecting, researching, still first and foremost, I will always consider myself an enthusiast and a fan, though.
And the thing I've known of John for years and had interactions with him on Twitter and Facebook and different things, but we had never met until just a few weeks ago in person. Thanks to Al Getz, and John and Al do Charting the Territories.
Yep.
And in Waterloo, I had several conversations with John, and John makes me think.
Oh.
He gives me questions that makes me think about the subjects we're talking about. That's why I said he's the perfect guy for this spot. And he will be hearing, as the people listening to this, some wild and crazy stories from independent wrestling. And if you don't know about independent wrestling, or only know of independent wrestling of the modern era, when I started, it was the Wild West. Carnage, thieves, just, it was anything goes, and there was no rules. And there were people working, trying to get a break, trying to make a living. And there were some people that were there just to take, rob, and steal. And independent wrestling is much more formatted, produced, controlled now than it was when I started. And it was still the Outlaws when I got in. There was still a few territories left, and there was still a few places to go, but it was the Outlaws. And people ask me when I say I said it last night in the dressing room to somebody about the Outlaws. And one of the young wrestlers said, what does that mean? I don't even know what that means. That's why this is important. Because this is a part of wrestling history that's getting lost. And I had given John a name a few weeks ago that he was not familiar with, of an outlaw promoter that we're going to cover on this program at some point. And that's Donald Van Fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And as I told John about it, then John starts doing research. I told John, I said, I'm fascinated by this guy. And he replied back to me too, because it's a story that most people don't know.
Yeah.
I was in wrestling for, probably 25 years before I ever heard Donald Van Fleet's name. First time I ever heard it, Jerry Oates mentioned him to me. I said, I don't have a clue who that is. And then Jerry Oates told me some stuff about him, and then I started looking into him. Everybody knows about Bruiser Brody and what happened in Puerto Rico to Brody. Terrible. Hardly anybody knows about the promoter that shot his brother-in-law and killed him in the dressing room in Kentucky. We're going to cover that at some point on this podcast. There's so much history, not just in the territories, that is being lost, but thank God for so many people like Al Getz and John and everybody else that sits and does the research and finds the history of these territories. And we're so lucky to have people like Ron and Robert Fuller and Don Wright and Bobby Simmons, different people that worked in offices that are still with us, that can answer questions and tell us stuff to make sure we get the story right. This podcast is going to be a little harder because very little is known about the outlaw wrestling before the 90s, unless you happen to just live somewhere that had it and you went to it. But through our research, we're going to bring people wild and crazy stories. We're going to show you where many people that became legendary names got their start in wrestling. But when the territories were still running, the independent wrestlers, the outlaw wrestlers, and an outlaw was anybody that was not affiliated with the territory where they were running. So if someone is running like Johnny Hunter in North Carolina, well, the Carolinas belong to the Crockett's, but he's running a full-time promotion himself there, he's an outlaw. And all of the wrestlers on his cards that are working for him are outlaws. And they were looked down upon from the territorial offices and the territorial wrestlers. Because for some reason, there was this misconception that these outlaw wrestlers were stealing the territory's towns and stealing money from the territory and blah, 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 blah. Where, John, you know this, you could run how many shows a week in New York City, and it would not affect Madison Square Garden's monthly event for Vince at all.
No, yeah.
You know,
it's when I think about the word outlaw in terms of outlaw promotion, outlaw promoter, outlaw wrestler. A lot of it has to do with perception, I feel.
Yes.
And like everything else not just in wrestling, but in life. I'm inclined to believe that it comes down to money. It's like, do the guys who are working for Lester Welch and Paul Jones, did they have gripes with the Gunkel crew out of loyalty to the National Wrestling Alliance, or because they felt like their pay was gonna take a hit? Um, you know, so
And that's a very good point there. Um, during that war in Atlanta, to me, Ann Gunkel had a rightful stake, and they tried to take it from her when her husband died.
100%, yeah.
So to me, she is the good guy in that war.
Yeah.
She lost that war,
mm-hmm.
but you look at all of the talent that stuck by her side and went with her. They saw her as being the good guy in the war also. And they stood up for her and they fought for her. And that was exactly right. The people on the other side, now the office had a completely different outlook than the talent working on the other side, on the NWA side, because the office thinking they're trying to take our money. And the boys are only worried about the wrestlers, and are they drawing better than us? Are they making more money? Because here's the deal. If Ann Gunkel would have came out on top, everybody on the NWA side would have tried to jump to Ann Gunkel. Every one of them.
Yep.
But it didn't work out that way. So it was perception, and it was, in some cases, the Outlaws were just terrible because they were untrained. They were that version of backyard wrestling pretty much, but they were running wherever they could run.
Yep.
It is a business, and it is a business first and foremost. So money's the biggest thing that drives it all. Independents, Outlaws, WWE, AEW, TNA, it doesn't matter. It's driven by money for the most part. But there are guys that don't care if they make money. They just want to wrestle on the weekends and have fun. But there's also outlaw wrestlers and outlaw promoters that made a very good living for many years and never worked in a territory. And that's fascinating to me, so much so that I became one of them. I am one of them. And if it wasn't for the people before me, I would have never been able to do it. But I just happened to come along also at a time where the whole landscape of wrestling changed because the territories were dying and going away. And there's nowhere for guys to go when the territory they're in dies. So they had to look to the Outlaws. People that just 5 years before they looked down upon as the scum of the earth. Some of them, not all of them did, but some of them did. Now they're having to go work with these guys and girls.
Yep.
But what was so good, they were able to teach people like me and teach them the wrestling ways. I tell people all the time, I'm fluent in Appalachian English, Carney, wrestler, and outlaw wrestler. That's the languages I speak. Because you can't talk to some outlaw guys the same way that you talk to a guy that was brought up in the territories. And we're going to cover that on every program, and we're going to do that segment later on. But you look at people, the outlaw promoters were looked on even worse than the outlaw wrestlers. Because there may have been some cases where an outlaw promoter went into a town and went to a high school or an armory or somewhere and said, hey, I do wrestling. Let me do my wrestling. It won't cost you anything, and I'll give you a bigger cut than the TV guys. And I got some guys that were on TV. Problem is, those guys that they had on TV were masked men, and they were all fakes. I cannot tell you how many fake assassins, wrestling 2, superstars, super destroyers. I'm trying to think who else was hot at the time when I first started wrestling. Guys that were not far removed from, but all those Russian assassins, they all had them. And I was guilty of it in the early days because I didn't know any better. And I thought, well, it's accepted. It's all right. And then just one day it came to me that this ain't cool. Why am I doing this? You know, they ain't drawing in any more or any less to begin with. So why not just call them something else? Why am I taking somebody else's name? And that was a big problem with outlaw wrestlers. But the promoters that would do that, and they would get to towns and they'd have the assassins, TV stars, the assassins, Mr. Wrestling 2, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And they would draw a big house in a town, some spot show somewhere that the office wanted to run off of TV, or they wanted, but the people get there and they see it and they go,
Ooh.
That ain't the real people.
Yeah.
That's not really Mr. Wrestling 2. That's not really one of the Garvins. That ain't the same assassins I saw on TV.
The spoiler's not walking the top rope. Oh,
right. We're going to get into the spoiler of East Tennessee at some point on this program. So people, for a lot, until you can brand something and brand it as your own to separate it from everything else, people see wrestling, they know wrestling. So the fly-by-night guy comes in with the fake assassins, but here comes Jim Crockett Promotions with the real assassins to the same building in some places, or a next town over. Well, I went to the wrestling over at the high school. That was a fake. They sent 2 fake guys. Didn't even look like, didn't have the same bodies or nothing. I ain't going over there. So it did hurt business. It did hurt business. And I don't care who they are or what crime they do. Anytime anybody is ever involved in the wrestling business that is arrested for anything, the headline has to say something about that wrestler arrested, promoter arrested. And it could be just some Saturday night wrestler in one town that did this horrendous crime and was arrested for it. But it hurt business because people saw it and said, I told you all those wrestlers are that way. So the office couldn't control, excuse me, the outlaws. So it hurt business in a little way. Not nearly what they claimed it did or they thought it did, because you could have outlaw wrestling in a rec center, say in Charlotte, say the outlaw guys are in the Grady Cole Center, which was the old Park Center, and then next door is Crockett in the stadium. Crockett was branded, Crockett was TV. They're going to go in there. Now, they may be a few go into the rec center because the tickets are $3 and $5, but the masses are going to see the TV wrestlers and what they knew.
Yep.
So that really didn't hurt business at all. The outlaw wrestlers were looked down upon because without the outlaw wrestlers, the outlaw promoter has nobody to promote.
Yep.
The outlaw promoter is going to take the majority of the heat, but these other guys that work on there, but also a lot of these guys that are working for this outlaw promoter are your local TV job guys, because that local office needs somebody to come do TVs. They're not going to take all of them, but they're going to take the better ones. That's how George South got his break. Somebody finally took him to TV, and they saw him and saw, here's a kid that can work. But up until that point, George was working Outlaws in the Carolinas and Tennessee and Georgia and wherever he could get booked. So there was guys and there was talent out there. There was guys that were working as many nights as the territory guys and the Outlaws. They weren't making nearly the money, but they were working regular, and they were getting to work with some old-time guys that knew how to work, that may have worked territories or whatever years before, because there was, just off the top of my head, I made this little list of ones that I know that came, people that came from the territory or got jobs in the territory systems that came out of the Outlaws. Jerry the King Lawler, Hillbilly Jim, Ron Wright, Whitey Caldwell, Bobby Fulton, Billy Travis, George South, Eric Embry. I'm sure there's a whole bunch more that I don't realize or just not thinking of right now.
We talked about Don Van Fleet. Bearcat Wright started with him.
Well, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So it was a way, the Outlaws and the independent wrestling was a way to get in the business. You ain't getting in going to the territories and hanging around.
And like, I think
unless
a good point you made
they
too
meet
is
you
like,
in a, go ahead.
A good point you just made, just to jump in real quick, is you had guys just starting out, and you also had guys who were on the near the end of their career. So you had that really great, you had both of that convergence there, which I think is really great. You have like these young kids who can't find much work aside from working for the outlaw promotions, and these older guys who maybe there's no spot for them working for, they can't work for Crockett, they can't work for Goulas, they're not on, they don't want them on TV anymore, but they still need to work. So there's a great spot for both of those, for them to, it's almost like a learning, a learning experience for these young kids, and a place for these guys. It's almost like a de facto training school,
Right. Yeah, because there was no wrestling schools. There was on-the-job training. You could buy your way in through some outlaw guys. They would take your money and supposedly train you. They would teach you a few things and go, all right, kid, you're wrestling next week. And they would throw you in front of a crowd with an old-timer to teach you. And if you didn't get it, they'd beat you up, stretch you, and run you off. If you went to a territory trying to get into wrestling, they would hold these camps, these tryouts once a year where you came and paid $500 to $1,000, and they would make you run and do squats and jumping jacks and sit-ups and push-ups till you were totally, completely exhausted. Then they would get you in the ring and just stretch you every which way, and they would beat you up, and you would run away going, it's for real.
Yep.
It was a money grab, and they got off on beating up young kids.
Yep.
And the other way to get in the business is how I got in the business. You got to have a connection. You got to have somebody that will speak up for you, and you have to be around enough to where the office people see you and the boys see you and they trust you. Because when I started, it was still a closed society. And it was men and women trying to make a living and further their lives and their careers. There's always been a little element of some hobbyists and 40 milers and local guys that just want to wrestle on their day off from their job in their hometown. But most people, from the Outlaws to the Territories to modern wrestling and the independents and the big national companies. And this was a hard lesson for me to learn, John, because I'll tell you, I held on to the past way too long, hoping it would come back around, and no, it ain't coming back around. And I was bitter about certain things, and just I got to where I hated sitting in the dressing room. What used to be my sanctuary, now I was a stranger in my homeland. Because these young kids came along, did not speak my language. They did not speak Carney. They did not speak wrestler. They didn't speak anything or act anything like wrestlers of when I started and in my youth. And one of the things that changed my view of all this was the pandemic. Because I went from being in a dressing room 3 to 5 nights a week to stuck in this house for a year. And I missed the road so bad that I would get out and drive every night, just drive around these back roads out here in the mountains. Because I was going crazy. I'd never been home. I'd had a couple of breaks with a back surgery and an ear surgery. And those were like 4 and 6 to 7 months. I'm going nuts at home. And I begin to watch younger guys on YouTube and stuff because I said, if the pandemic, if this ever goes away, I'm going to start running and promoting again. Because up to the pandemic for a few years, all I was doing was fairs and festivals and that. But I had all these ideas and all these things come to me sitting still for the first time in my life, of angles and finishes and all this wrestling stuff, until I had to deal with personal stuff and some health issues, which prolonged the pandemic for me. I was out pretty much for 2 years.
Wow.
But when I started coming back around and I started going to Tom Pritchard's school, meeting these young kids in these other places, for the first time in my life, I started listening to them. They don't speak my language, but they had the same dreams. They had the same hopes and aspirations and goals. In the early days of my wrestling life and career, I surrounded myself with territorial guys. Stomper, Jimmy Golden, Robert Fuller, Jimmy Valiant, Rock and Roll Express, Garvin, Wahoo, all these guys that I used over the years. Tracy Smothers. I surrounded myself with them to learn from them. Now I surround myself with young guys to help teach them. I teach them the same lessons that were taught to me, but I also talk to them and listen to them because I have to be able to understand them. They didn't grow up, as you said at the beginning, we grew up watching the same stuff. They didn't see that. They all, like, they'll tell me, I started watching wrestling in 2000, 2003, 2007. I didn't watch wrestling at all then. The only thing I saw was what I was involved in. I didn't keep up with it. I mean, around 2000, I just stopped watching because I was just so busy doing what I was doing. I stopped watching everything else. And it was not the wrestling I grew up on.
Exactly.
But this is the same old story. We're in the circle of life.
Yep.
Because the Goldens and the Stompers and the Fullers and the Riches and the Wahoos and the Handsome Jimmies were all teaching us what they had learned. And they were all trying to understand us because they're looking at it. Well, the territories are dead. Why do these guys want to get in the wrestling business now? There's nowhere to go.
Can I?
You know, they thought. Go ahead.
Oh, I guess for my sake, and also for the listeners who may not know, what year did you actually break into the wrestling business?
1988.
1988. Okay, so that's
14 years old.
Yeah, it's hard to put to have like a D-Day for when did the territories end. But I'd always like in my head from the outside, I always like sort of looked at it as from like 88 to 93 is when everything started to. It's when the bomb first dropped. Whether that's because of you Crockett selling to Turner, whether that's part of it, and there's that sort of, and then sort of the bomb. The fallout from the bomb from that just sort of like took a couple of years before everything was just there was, and it was all, and there's nothing left.
As I've told you before, I had two older cousins, one by blood, one by marriage, involved in wrestling all the way back to the 60s. And my mom, she was in a management position for service merchandise. When Walmart came in, Sam Walton, like any great booker and promoter, raided everybody else and took their talent. So my mom went to work for Walmart in management, and one of my mom's jobs was promotions. And my cousin Zach Murray, who had reffed in Mid-Atlantic and Southeastern and Georgia and a few other places. Nick worked for Nick Goulas and a few other places. Zach Murray had a family, and he got off the road and got out of the wrestling business. And him and a friend started a candy business, and they invented these suckers. And I can't remember what they're called, but I still see them at the checkouts at Walmart. And my mom helped Zach get his candies at the checkout counters in the local Walmarts, and then it grew from there.
Huh.
As a kid, I would see Zach on TV, and my granny and my mom and would say, that's your cousin right there, the referee, that's your cousin. So I always thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So when Zach moved back from Charlotte and got here and got into the candy business and everything, I would see him all the time. And I was a kid, and I would just start pestering him. Hey, how you getting wrestling? I'm like 10 years old. Well, you got to. He don't know how to answer me, but he's got to tell me something, Well, you got to train and work hard, and just all these BS deals that he's telling me, kayfabing me. So when Walmart starts opening, my mom was in one of the first Walmarts in Kingsport, which was one of the first Walmarts in East Tennessee. My mom retired from Walmart. So she gets put in charge of helping promote the grand openings of the Walmarts. Greenville, Newport, Moorestown, blah, 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 wherever here in East Tennessee in her district. And I say to my mom, it would draw a crowd, have the wrestlers. So my mom asked Zach. Zach gives my mom the office number in Knoxville. to Bob Polk. That's where the connection is made through family, through that. Now, Ron Fuller is running USA Wrestling here in 88. And we're booking, or my mom is booking the Party Boys, Johnny, Davy Rich, Scott Armstrong, and the Walmarts. Well, they got to be nice to me because I'm their golden goose. I'm the kid, but and I still talk to all three of them to this day, Scotty, Davy, and Johnny. So we meet Ronnie West, Bob Pope, both wonderful men and great people in my life. Without them, this crazy world that I've grown up in would never happen for me. So I'm getting free tickets anywhere, they're at here, Knoxville, Johnson City, Morristown, spot shows, wherever. I get to go for free. So it's cool. Yeah. And I got to know them, and I'm 14 years old at this time. So I'm in Knoxville one Friday night, and I'm just at the gimmick table talking to Davey Rich. The doors are not even open. It's early because they'd let us come in early and everything. We got to know them all. We got to know the office people and the top baby faces. So Ron West comes walking through, and Davey Rich is sitting at his table, and I'm standing in front of the table talking to him. And he goes, "Ronnie, give this kid a job. He loves our business, and he's always around." And Ronnie does not stop walking. He just kind of glances and sees me and keeps going. But as he's walking off, he goes, "I was about his age when I started." Okay. Which was true. Ronnie West started at 14. So that's a Friday night. Tuesday, Ron West calls my mother at Walmart at her job and asked to hire me. Said, "Do you think you'd like to set the ring up, sell programs, and hang posters in the towns?" And I had a mom or my dad or sister, somebody would drive me around to hang posters in Kingsport, Johnson City, wherever they were running here. And I would take receipts to Ron West or Bob Pope, and they would pay me whatever the gas was that we used doing it. And then I would sell merchandise or whatever, like programs, or help the boys sell pictures. And I got 10% of that. So I started getting paid to be involved in wrestling at 14. I thought right then, this is my life. Knoxville, Memphis, Knoxville. Because I knew wrestlers, because Zach had told me guys had careers just in the Tennessee offices, just moving one to one, 6 months in East Tennessee, 6 months in Middle Tennessee, 6 months in Memphis. Mm-hmm. So I thought this is what my life was going to be. Thanksgiving week in Knoxville, 1989, I hear Johnny Rich say, I'm sitting there I've got my stack of programs waiting to sell them when the doors open. And I hear Johnny Rich say to one of the boys, "Birmingham's canceled Monday, and I think we're out of business." And I'm going, "What?" I didn't say nothing. I'm just trying to absorb what I just heard. And I'm trying to understand, how is this possible? Because I'm not seeing the Alabama end of the Continental Territory. I only did East Tennessee towns. So I didn't understand that Knoxville was the golden goose keeping the rest of the territory running. But even it had started to drop in mid to late 89. Continental's out of business. I have no involvement in wrestling now. Wait a minute. This is my life. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do. My mom comes home from work one day and says, "Hey, you ever heard of a guy named Big Al Bass?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, he put an application in today for a job at Walmart." She said his real name's Al Shockley, but he told me he was a wrestler and that was his name. I was like, "I know Don Bass and Sam Bass and Ron Bass." Come to find out, Big Al was Jody and Sam's nephew. And he was one of the local independent outlaw wrestlers who was trying to start an outlaw promotion in his time not working at Walmart. And so I got to know Al, got to go to the wrestling, and I just, same thing that I was doing for Ronnie West, I started doing for Al, helping put the ring up and sell tickets and, whatever needed to be done. There wasn't much merchandise. Outlaw guys didn't understand merchandising back then. Some of them would, and they just have like a little 4x6 or 3x5 pictures. They didn't have a whole selection of stuff. They didn't. Of course, a lot of places they was wrestling, there wasn't very many people there to sell pictures to begin with. So in June of either 89 or 90, I'm trying to know what it would have been 90. Because 89 Continental still going. So in June of 90, right before I turned 16 in July, I'm selling tickets in McFeeters Bend, Tennessee, a little community in Hawkins County. Have you ever seen the Sissy Spacek Mel Gibson movie, The River?
Years ago.
It was made in McFeeters Bend.
Okay. The
scene where they're playing softball is behind the gym that they were running wrestling in that night.
Huh.
And I'm sitting there selling tickets, and I just happened to look over, and Al stuck his head out the curtain and was like, "Come here." So I got up and walked over there, and he goes, "Do you think you can referee?" I said, "Maybe when I grow up." you know? And he goes, "I mean, like in 10 minutes.
Oh, dear.
I was like, I'll pay you. I can do it. Because again, it's a business.
Yep.
That's all that matters. I had remembered that I had ref the first match, and then the referee that was booked had showed up. And then a couple years ago, I went back and actually watched a video of it. And I ref the second match. They had a wrestler ref the first match. I ref the second match. And the referee showed up while I was in the ring reffing that match. So I only did the one match. But that was on a Saturday night. That week that followed, Al shows up to my house with a referee shirt and says, "I've got you booked." And I started right then. And here we are 36 years later. And I have been booked solid, except the pandemic and the health scare after that, and 2 breaks for surgery.
Wow.
And I was thrown into a world that I was not ready for. Much like John was thrown into a world in Waterloo, Iowa that he was not ready for,
Oh yeah.
I was thrown into the wrestling business. And Al's gone now. And I miss Al so much. He was smart to wrestling, but he was outlaw smart. He gave me an opportunity. He gave me an education in what he knew, but I knew there was more. Al managed a guy by the name of Glenn Day that we called Crunch. That was his nickname, and he wrestled as the Equalizer. Then it became Crunch the Equalizer because all the boys kept calling him Crunch in the ring, and I said, add it to the Equalizer. So they were the first ones to take me on the road and teach me and help me and get me started. Both of them are gone now. And I dearly owe them so much. And I dearly love them so much. And I spoke at both of them's funerals. And their pictures hang in my office. And I talk to Crunch every day for, 30 years. That's why this project is important to me. I will tell my story interwoven with what we're doing here, but I want to spend more time telling the story of Big Al and Crunch and Donald Van Fleet and Dale Mann and Johnny Hunter and Dominic DiNucci and Ken Jugan and all these guys that are responsible for outlaw wrestling and independent wrestling and the changes over the years. Al and Crunch protected me the best they could from this business and what was going on when I was a young man. But it didn't take me long to find it on my own. Because it was accessible and it was there.
Oh, boy.
And you may be asking yourself, what was? Anything you wanted. Anything. The good, the bad, the ugly. Young guys now, young girls now, they don't have to worry as much about that lifestyle. They don't have to worry about some of the dangers that people of my generation and before had to worry about. You hear riot stories. You know, Ron and Don and all the stories that hear in these hills of the Wright brothers and Bill Caney, and you hear different people on different podcasts talk about riots, and they talk about the cops fighting the people and the wrestlers fighting the people. We had riots in the Outlaws too, but guess what we did not have? Security. Or police.
Oh boy.
We may have one cop that's off duty. Sometimes it was a wrestler who wrestled under a mask, and the rest of the time sit out there with his uniform on because the building required it. Young kids don't have to worry about that stuff now. I love the business more than anybody that you'll ever meet. And I got to where I hated the business, and now I love it again. And I love it now because my little 7-year-old nephew and little 6-year-old niece are ate up with the sickness of professional wrestling.
Oh boy.
I went somewhere with my little niece Aubrey last week, and I got in the car, and first thing she said, "Uncle Beau, did you watch SummerSlam?" I said, "No, baby, I was wrestling in West Virginia." She began to tell me everything about it.
Wow.
And I got sick to my stomach. Not over the wrestling, not over. I watch more product now than I've ever, well, not ever, but I've watched since I've been in the business. I realize little Aubrey Rose, my beautiful little princess over here, has the wrestling sickness. The day she tells me she wants to be as a wrestler, I'm dead. I will fall dead of a stroke or a heart attack right then.
Oh, boy.
Waylon already believes he's a wrestler. But this podcast is important to me for them to hear the stories of the people that helped their uncle. It's important to me to tell the stories of the people that are important to me. And I'm going to entertain people with some of the wildest and craziest and stupidest stuff you have ever heard in your life. And John has heard a little bit of this in person and off the air.
Yes.
And it's going to be a wild ride. And I love the fact that we have this program here to do that. But also every podcast, and everybody that uses me between the sheets, I've done that so many times. I've done John McAdams a few times. I've did several other people, Mike Mills, several. I always try to be educational and entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Educational first. I try to teach something about the business and something of how it goes. And then I'm entertaining because wrestlers are natural born storytellers, and sometimes we just have to entertain ourselves. So now that we have explained what the podcast is going to be about, let's explain a segment of this podcast. We're going to do a spotlight of a card every month, an outlaw or independent card. So for the month of August, I want to start off with a Southern States Wrestling card. And then I'm going to give you a couple of stories coming out of this. And John, get some questions if you have any as I go through the results.
Oh, I've got it. Just right off the bat, I've got a question just for listeners who may not be
Okay.
familiar. Explain Southern States Wrestling. Explain that promotion.
Okay, that is a great question. If my first book, Do You Want to Be a Wrestler, Kid? It is in great detail about it. Patreon, King of Kingsport, it is in great detail of how it started. I'll give the cliff notes here. I'm working for Al. I'm working for every outlaw promoter within 150 miles of home. The summer between freshman and sophomore years in high school. Is that right? No, let's see. Yeah, sophomore and junior. So junior and senior year of high school, I'm working at least 4 nights a week and still going to school because there was no way my parents were going to let me quit school to be a wrestler. But I'm working as a referee. And Al, years earlier, had a car wreck. He had no memory the rest of his life of the car wreck. Doesn't know if he was driving or if his friend was driving or if the other car was driving. Al's the only person that lived through the car wreck. And it broke both legs, and he had a long, that's why he's managing Crunch and not wrestling anymore, was after the car wreck. So managing and running a town and promoting and all that stuff, it was taking a toll on Al. So Al has a couple towns down here around Kingsport that he's doing. He'd end Kingsport ever so often, and he's successful. Al was the first outlaw promoter that I worked for that I saw sell a building out.
Huh.
He sold out to Kingsport Armory a couple times by hard work of getting out and hustling the town, him and Crunch and other people, and me too, doing it. We did that in January of no, not January. We did that in maybe it was January, end of 90 or beginning of 91. I can't remember. It couldn't have been the beginning of 91. Somewhere in 90, he sold out the Armory. I don't have my books in front of me. But anyways, we go and wrestle. Crunch is wrestling, Al's managing, I'm reffing a town up Irwin or somewhere up there, maybe Elizabeth, and on the other side of Johnson City. So we're coming home one night, and Al says to me, he goes, "Hey, I got a couple more shows I'm going to do, and then I'm done. You ought to think about taking it over." I'm 16 years old. I've got, less than a year in the ring, which I'm a lot more than a year time worth of guys now because they don't run as many towns now. But I mean, I'm greener than goose poop.
Yeah.
So Al has superior championship wrestling. That's why if you see pictures of our first Southern State heavyweight champions, Equalizer, Skyfire, Christians, different guys, the belt says SCW because we just used the belt that we took over from Al's. Crunch had made the belt. I had the belt, and when Crunch passed, I gave it to his grandson. So there comes the part in early 91, nothing's running. For some reason, the end of 90, after Al was the most successful guy in the Tri-Cities area, there was some other people in Knoxville that were doing good, but it just kind of like all of a sudden the bookings dried up. It was like, oh no, like Continental, here, this is my life. It can't go away. It can't go away. Now, what's the heck's happening here? So Al says, we'll get a town and run it. So Stan Lee and I talk about it. We knew where a building was at because we worked there for other people. So we knew we could get the Gap Creek Community Center in Carter County, Tennessee for $50. Now, John, when I say community center, you may think of, a nice gym with basketball court and
bleachers,
bleachers and shower rooms and bathrooms and electricity and heat and
electricity.
Not here.
Oh dear.
I first went to this building in probably 2 weeks after I started reffing. And we pull up to this building and I see it, and it's straight out of Alfred Hitchcock movie. I mean, this place is like nothing I had ever seen. And I go, what in the world is this? So you have to go up these big steps to go up, to go in, and then back down steps to go into the gym. So you go down the steps into the gym, or when you get to the lobby, when you get to the top of the outside steps coming in, what it was the gym that was left of a school that burnt to the ground.
Oh, wow.
And they hauled the school off, and it's just a gym there by itself now.
Okay.
So when you walk in, it's not bad. There's a little concession stand off to the left. It was probably a classroom or something at one time. Off to the right is 2 little bathrooms that I never went in them. I've never seen them. I don't even know what they look like. Just, I knew there was a door that said men, the door that said women. That they were there to the right. Then there was a hallway where you go down into the gym, down steps, and at the bottom of those steps, you make another turn and go down another set of steps into the dressing room. Well, if you go down the babyface side, you had to go down this long, dark hallway. And I mean, there's no light fixtures, there's no lights, there's no electricity in this part of the building.
Oof.
You're walking through darkness. And as you walk down this hallway, at the very end of the hallway is a light. And you can see silhouettes and a few bodies moving around in there. All the boys are dressing in that room that had one 40-watt light bulb hanging in it.
Okay.
And I do mean hanging. It's hanging down from an exposed wire. So as you're walking this darkness, now remember, there's no cell phone, so you can't light your cell phone up to see.
Yeah.
Whether you smoked or not, you had to have a lighter or a flashlight so you could see to get down that hallway. As you would walk down the hallway, there would be these doorways to your left, and you would hear, I always assume, animals moving around in there every so often.
Oh, dear.
Like rats, possums, who knows what. On more than one occasion, I've known of wrestlers to go in those rooms and take a poop on the floor and go back in the dressing room. All the boys would stand in the doorway and piss into those rooms because they were dirt floors. I one time shined a light in there to see. So they would run this building every so often, and I've seen pictures and I've seen some videos of where it was full of people. Well, not when I started going there. It was probably half full of people, 50, 60, 70 people.
Okay.
It'd hold probably 300. So maybe 100 people at sometimes. It was 100 degrees in there or you froze to death. There was no in between. I'm standing in the ring one night reffing, and just happened out of the corner of my eye, I see a wire fall from the ceiling of the gym and hit the floor and was on fire.
Oh, no. Oh.
And nobody else puts it over. And I'm going, I know I didn't imagine that. So I kind of lean over the ropes to look, and there's a piece of wire just smoldering on the ground there.
Oh.
And one of the guys over the building comes over it and pours water on it and picks it up and carries it off. The building ended up burning to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When?
So,
how long after that?
90, 94 or 95.
Oh, so that's it. Got a couple years.
Yeah, got a few years out of it. I ran it twice. I ran it the first time because it was the only building I knew we could get that I could pay $50 for and get.
Yeah.
So I get the building. I put a little card together. Stan Lee helps me put a card together. And it's mostly young guys. Now, there's a few veterans on it. George Hyatt. I don't know if you're familiar with George Hyatt, but George is a longtime East Tennessee guy. He broke in with Ron and Don, under Ron and Don and those guys, and worked here.
Okay.
Cowboy Williams, Tim Williams, another old-time Tennessee guy. There was a couple other older guys that I used, but mostly kids, because Southern States Wrestling was started as a learning ground, a place to teach young wrestlers. And it was started to teach me and my crew. And here we are 33 years later, and it's still a proving ground and a teaching ground for young guys and girls. And I'm very proud of the last couple of years, what we've done. There's some years in there that I'm not very proud of at all. And should have not been running and didn't want to be running, but we're running for, I had sponsors and family reasons, trying to help my family. So, first show was February 16th, 1991. Crunch and I have to find the ring because there was like a community ring that Carol Dickerson owned and he let people use. So I had to call around and find it. We had to go dig it out of a barn that morning, take it to the building, learn how to set it up because it was, get ready to laugh, John. This ring once was a state bridge on a state highway.
I'm sorry, what?
A blind man cut it to pieces and they were tearing the bridge down. A blind man, or he wasn't blind then, goes to it and says, "Hey, can I have that steel? What are you doing with that steel?" They go, "We scrap it." He goes, "Can I have it?"
Okay.
So he comes back with a torch and cuts it up and gets enough that he thinks he can build a ring out of, and he builds a ring.
Wow.
So I end up buying that ring shortly after I get started and had to redo it. Me and Crunch and my dad spent 2 months welding, building, fixing it to make it usable. It was a death trap. It was a death trap. So
Can't imagine. Oh.
we get it together, and I'm planning on running this one time. Now, people find out I'm running. People start calling, wanting to get on the show, wanting this and that, and you're everybody's best friend.
Yep.
So I'm like, the heck with that. I got my group of guys, and these are guys that I know and trust. Other than a couple, I'm having to use them because of the good old boy deal, because they're buddies with somebody I did want.
Yep.
So I don't. Here's how Gap Creek ran before that. Somebody would pay the money, they would run the show. Whoever showed up got to wrestle. Whoever paid the rent would take the money. If he paid people, he paid them. If he didn't, he didn't. Most all the people that worked there nowhere else. Now, a lot of people started there. A lot of my early crew started there, young kids like me. So I got a lot of young guys, and I'm not adding anybody that I'm not booked. I've booked my guys. This is them. Well, these other guys are showing up wanting to, and I'm just like, no, I'm not. I've always been go by the advertisement. If you have to make a substitution, which I absolutely despise making substitutions, but if you have to, you have to. But if you don't. And don't just let whoever wrestle, whoever, you got to have a game plan. You got to have an idea. You got to be able to do something. So that's what I had. So these guys are showing up and they're like, "Who am I working?" Well, I don't have you booked. You're not. I cannot tell you how many times that day had the phrase "F you" said to me, and I was called a son of a bitch and a little bastard and everything else. I'm 16 years old dealing with grown men that are acting like children. So I get through the first event, and I actually made a profit.
Wow.
Would you like to guess how much money I made on that show, John?
Let's go $20 just to keep it easy.
I wish. I made $2.
$2, a profit nonetheless.
$2. But I made a profit.
You're still ahead. Still ahead.
I paid the talent something. I paid the rent. I paid the posters. And I had $2 left over.
Okay. So
the next day, it comes to me that maybe I really can do this. Maybe I can. How do I do it? Oh, fundraisers. Because that's how I got started through Continental, helping them book nonprofit shows for high schools. School gets 20% in the concessions. They have no risk. They're not putting any money up. The office is. So I get the phone book. And I just start calling schools. I'm 16 years old. I played hooky from school on Monday to book towns. The first principal that called me back was a wonderful man named Mr. Childers. And I'll never forget his name. I don't know that I ever knew his first name because I just called him Mr. Childers. He was the principal of Carters Valley Elementary School in Hawkins County, not far from where I reffed the first time. So we book an event there, a couple of months away. Now I got time to get my stuff together. But I'm still I want young guys, and I want the guys that will help teach us. So I want the George Hyde, I want a Crunch, I want Wayne Rogers. Wayne worked several territories. I want these guys that will help and teach us. I don't want these bullies and these assholes. I don't want these people that just show up when they want to and just walk in and go, who am I working? But I also still have the little political stuff and the good old boy system that I'm having to deal with from the other people that were running around here. Namely, the group that was running that called the Professional Wrestling Association out of Greenville, Tennessee, and the ones that ran Gap Creek. Because now they got this little loudmouth punk 16-year-old kid telling him he can't wrestle his friend on his show. They didn't like it. So the first show that I ran, by the way, it did not have the SSW name on it. It was just professional wrestling. That's what the poster said, just pro wrestling. Yeah. So I want to brand. Mm-hmm. I want a name I want to separate from everybody else. And I want to give a name. You being my age, we know this. Worldwide Wrestling Federation, National Wrestling Alliance, Southeastern Championship Wrestling, Mid-South Wrestling. They were all geographical names.
Yep.
So I wanted a geographical name. And I don't know how, I picked Southern States Wrestling. I don't know how. I just did. If I had go back and do it again, I would have not called it Southern States Wrestling.
Why not?
I would have called it Appalachian States Wrestling. Because I end up growing out of this area. But again, I'm a 16-year-old kid and I don't know. I have no memory. I have not memory. I have no vision of ended up running 5 states with this promotion. I'm a kid just trying to get in anywhere. So we run that town. John?
Yep.
Second ever event I ran, I sold out the Carters Valley Elementary School gym.
Wow.
So now I'm just full of myself standing back there looking and look at this, boys.
Yeah.
But I'm learning lessons, valuable lessons every time that we're running.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
And I booked a guy from Carters Valley to be on the card, but he was terrible. His name was Tiny Lloyds, and he wrestled as the Tennessee Warrior. He was a fat guy with Ultimate Warrior face paint that he did not use a brush. He put it on with his finger, and it was not the acrylic paint that true professionals use. It was some kind of clown makeup.
Oh.
And he wore sweatpants and moccasins.
Oh, geez.
But I figured he'll draw some local people, so I put him on the card.
Oh.
Well, he wants to be in the main event because he's from there. And I said, well, you're not the main event. Main event's my champion, or soon-to-be champion, Skyfire, who became Easy Money in ECW years later, and Jason Jett, and Wayne Rogers, the territorial guy. That's the main event. That's what we got to Well, he doesn't show up to intermission because he didn't want to be on early matches. Well, not
Yeah.
here. He walks in. I said, your match has already happened. I got nothing for you. So he gets mad. And I'd have a few more rounds with him. In the opening spot of my main event that night, Wayne Rogers gets a severe groin pull. And as he hits the ropes, he drops like he's had a heart attack.
Oh, no.
And I'm in the ring reffing, and I'm scared to death because I think he's having a heart attack.
Oh,
and he's like, no, it's so we have to get him out of the ring, roll him out of the ring. We're one minute into the main event.
Oh, no.
So Crunch has to come back and jump in the ring and take the place and have the match. So now I got a little momentum. I still see the problems I'm dealing with these guys. But I just did something at 16 years old that these other grown men around here are not doing. I just filled an elementary school up.
Yeah.
Bleachers were full. Somehow, some way, I get a meeting with the city of Kingsport to talk to them about holding wrestling as a part of Fun Fest, which is a citywide festival that's been going on for 40 some years now. So it's been going on for over a decade at this point. So they bring in big acts for the weekend concert series, fireworks, hot air balloon. Every day for 10 days, there's some events going on in and around Kingsport for this festival. Well, they'd never had wrestling. 16 years old, I sit in front of the Kingsport City group and the Kingsport Tourist. And I sell them on having my wrestling promotion a part of this festival. I can't remember what I said. I don't know how I said it. I don't know how I held myself together to get through this meeting because I was a nervous wreck. They agree.
Well,
now they give me the guidelines. You can only charge so much per ticket. It's not to make money. Fun Fest gets this much money, blah, 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 blah.
mm-hmm.
Well, what if I get sponsors? Oh, that's yours.
Oh.
I have a meeting at my house with my crew. And I said, boys, this is big and this is what we can do. But to do this, we have to get out and get sponsors. Had the date, had the building, knew where I was at. I need sponsors and I need headliners. I don't know how to book any headliners. My Rolodex at this time, John, consists of pretty much Crunch and Al and about 8 other people. Yeah. How do I book guys off of TV? How do I, I'm now at the 1 year point of being in the ring. Now, here's what's so crazy about the statement I just made about I don't know how to book headliners. I've already been in the ring with Mongolian Stomper and Jimmy Golden and a few other people. I've worked with them.
Yeah.
But like I didn't get their numbers or nothing. I didn't know that's how you did it. So I'm trying to think of who can I get? How do I get something? I got to have something. What am I going to do? So we're still working on it, but we're getting sponsors. And this is in like April and May.
Gotcha. You mentioned your crew. Who can you name some of the, like, who would be the guys in your crew at this time?
The the early crew, my veterans were Crunch, George Hyatt, Wayne Rogers. Those were my three main veteran guys that had been around, and they'd worked with a lot of people, and they could help you and lead you and teach you. There was another guy that'd been around for a few years, Jamie Gibson. I had to use Carol Dickerson because of the ring situation. Once I bought the ring, I didn't have to worry about who and when and where I used anybody. Jeff Love and Scott Sterling, they were the young guns. They were my top baby faces. Scott still works with me today. Scott is my assistant booker and producer. All these years later, we're still, I mean, it's just, we work great together and always have. Eddie Golden, Danny and Bam Bam Christian, and I'm sure I've probably forgot one or two. And if anybody's listening, it was a part of this, I deeply apologize, because this is my crew, and they mean a lot to me because they launched me and got me going. And Easy Money, Skyfire, he was our top protege, babyface guy that we wanted, and I wanted him as the champion, and Stan Lee. And then I would use different guys in and out, just trying to figure out those other positions and spots of who would. I'm still trying to figure all this out, what to do. Yeah. So, but I have this meeting, we get it, and everybody's on board. Everybody's helping. By mid-May, I have almost $2,500 in sponsorship money.
Oh, wow.
I still don't have a headliner. I asked Al about, because Al had worked with everybody, but Al gave a good point to me. Stomper lives here. Jimmy Goat, they live around Knoxville. They're here. Mm-hmm. Everybody's seen them hundreds of times. They'll still draw you a house. They'll still do good. But you got the money to get some people. Let's try to get some legendary names. I don't think that was what was used at the time, but let's try to household names.
Yep.
Somehow I get the number to the South Atlantic Pro Wrestling office in Charlotte, who was at the time being led by Frank Dusick, trying to open up the old Crockett territory.
Okay.
And we do not get their TV here, but I've seen them in the magazines, and I knew that they had TV in the Carolinas. So my mom makes the first call to the office, and as a representative of Walmart, who was helping sponsor this big event at the deal.
Smart.
Let me back up real fast. We're in a town somewhere, and the boys are telling everybody about this deal, but I don't want everybody to know about it till the Fun Fest announces it itself, because everybody's trying to get on this stupid thing. Yep. And driving me nuts. But Don Wright is in a town teaming with Wayne Rogers. And Ron, if you're not from East Tennessee, Ron and Don Wright are the Anderson brothers here. Yep. They're the most legendary team and stars, along with Whitey Caldwell. So Wayne goes, "You thought about booking Donnie?" I was like, "Oh, I'd like to." I said, "How much money does he want?" He goes, "I don't know. Let's go talk to him." So we walked over there. So I asked Donnie, I said, "So what do you want to work on this deal?" He goes, "Is it in Kingsport?" I said, "Yeah." He said, $50, $75. I'll do it. What? Yeah. But now I understand it now. Especially because I'd already reffed a few of Donnie's matches, but he's helping us because we're trying to open something up and do something right.
Yep.
He listened to what we were saying, and he sees potential in this, that it can be something. So he goes, you want me to call Big Tony? I'll call Big Tony. That's Tony Peters.
Okay.
Another legendary name here that we just lost a year ago.
Yeah.
I said, yeah. I said, how about Ron? Well, Ron don't live here. He lives in Durham. I said, well, could you call him? I'll call him. All right. When I got home that night, Don Wright called me late at night. Goes, I talked to Big Tony. He said, whatever I get, he gets. I said, all right. Tell him to be there. He goes, I'm going to call Ron in the morning. I said, all right, thank you. Next afternoon, I get a phone call. Talk to Ron. Now, I don't know what's coming. I don't, this is Ron Wright. This is the man that built this. I mean, he's the guy.
Yeah.
More people have paid to see Ron Wright in East Tennessee than paid to see Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
Here. I mean, he's the man. So I'm guessing the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do it. Because he's kind of been out of wrestling at this point a few years, and he's got a family. And I'd met Ron with Continental and everything. So I'm thinking, it's just going to be a polite no. But hey, I tried. I can tell all the boys, I tried to get Ron Wright for this.
Yeah.
So Donnie calls and he goes, I talked to Ron. I said, okay, thank you. I mean, I'm getting ready for my polite, okay, I understand speech.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ron said he loved to do it, $100.
Okay.
What? What? Yeah, he's coming for Durham, so he wants 100. What I didn't know, I was paying for the family reunion. Because he's coming and bringing Teresa and the kids to see Donnie and the rest of the family.
Yeah.
That weekend. But I don't care. I mean, thank God he did.
Yeah.
Gas was $1 a gallon back then. So, so I know I got them. Okay, great. I got localized household names, regional names. I want a headliner. So my mom calls South Atlantic, talks to Frank Dusick. Frank Dusick says they would like to help us out because we're getting started, blah, blah, blah. Here's what we'll do. I'll bring you Ivan Koloff against Chris Chavis, who, if you don't know, Chris Chavis becomes Tatanka.
Yes.
I will bring you the Fantastics, Bobby and Jackie Fulton, and they will wrestle Paul Jones and Curtis Thompson. We'll bring you the headlining acts for your event. Well, how much is this going to cost? $900. Okay, great. I'm like, what? Okay. So we agree. Maybe 3 days later, Dusick calls back and goes, I need you to Western Union that money right now. I got it because I got sponsorship money.
Yep.
But Big Al told me don't ever pay anybody until the job is done.
Mm.
You can't trust everybody in this business. So I was like, no, I will hand it to you the moment you walk in the door of the building.
Yeah.
Well, blah, blah, blah. I've got a second generation guy from a family that's been involved in wrestling for 100 years talking to a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
He's trying to get my money without doing anything.
Yeah.
Which this now leads us to our first segment of story of the week, even though we had notes, people, but John's questions have kind of shot him out of order, but that's fine. Just enjoy it. So the headline of the story for this program was Frank Dusic's an asshole. So that's where we're at now. So he calls me like 2 more times. And now he's like kind of trying to bully me into sending. But are we advertised? I said, yes, the advertisement's out because now the city we're in the book. You can look on my Facebook fan page and Twitter and stuff because I share stuff from it every year because this was the defining moment, John, in my life of I don't want to be an outlaw.
Yeah.
But I'll be an independent. I'm not some outlaw kid. I am, but I'm not going to be. I am, but I'm learning. I am, and you're not getting over on me.
Yeah.
So it continues back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for a few days. And I keep telling him, you will get your money the moment you walk in the building. I will pay everybody. So finally I get the okay, we'll do it that way. This is 3 weeks before the event.
Okay.
So I'm still promoting. The city's promoting. It's out there everywhere. Tickets are selling. I think they're all coming. I believe they're all coming. So a wrestler that I knew works in a town with Ivan Koloff somewhere. Now this is 2 or 3 weeks out. And he doesn't know anything about the event.
Koloff
doesn't know anything about it.
Oh dear.
So the guy calls me the next day and he says, hey, I gave Ivan your number, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm freaking panicking.
Yeah.
Because my name's on this. I'm the one that sat in front of the office, but then I'm thinking, well, hell, the city can't sue me. I'm not even legal age yet. So I got that out. I'm already thinking, how am I getting out of this? So I answer the phone and I hear a voice that says, can I speak to Beau or Faye? I've never heard this voice in my life. I said, you're speaking with Beau. Who is this? Ivan Koloff. Nice to meet you. I'm hearing the real voice for the first time. Not the accent.
Yeah.
So I'm like, holy crap. Okay. Calm down. Holy shit. Calm down.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a 16-year-old kid. I'm now speaking to a guy that I hated with all of my guts and passion as a wrestler just a couple of years before this.
Yeah.
And I went to see get beat many times. Now, the second part of the titled story of this program was, Frank Dusick is asshole, part 1, but Ivan saves the day, part 2. So my mom gets on the extension in the other room, so we're talking to Ivan, and Ivan says, look, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know anything about this. I hear I'm promoted. I'm hearing this. I can do it. I'm not booked on that night. I can do it. But I don't know about payment arrangements. So we tell him the story about Frank Dusick.
Yeah.
So Ivan goes, well, first of all, if I'm part of that $900, then The other guys ain't coming because he goes, I get 250 myself. So we said, okay, you'll get it. You know, as soon as you walk in the door here, you'll get it. We have it. I mean, as soon as okay, I'll do it. He says, now on the Fantastics, he goes, Bobby is in Japan or going to Japan. I can't remember if he was there or going because they were running a wrestling school together. So he goes, but Jackie can, I'm pretty sure Jackie can do it. I'll find out. And he tells us a price for him. So I said, well, what about this, and this? You know, here's a 16-year-old kid talking to the man that beat Bruno Sammartino in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
16-year-old kid asking advice from a world champion.
Yeah.
A true professional, a legend that should be in every wrestling Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And Ivan Koloff says to me, he says, listen, does anybody in Kingsport even know who Chris Chavez is? I said, I don't think so. He goes, put any Indian in it. I said, well, I don't like to do. He goes, you got to do them. You're going to have to change. He goes, I'll work with anybody. I said, well, we got this guy, you know, so now he's booked with Crunch. Had to change the card a little bit. So Crunch is going to wrestle Ivan. He goes, you got Ron and Don right. And on the other side of the ring from Ron and Don was Hoot Gibson, who worked for the Poffos and worked some for the Crockett's and worked at Kingsport territory. Rick Connors, same deal. So their name value got them, and then Easy Munch Skyfire's their partner against Wayne, Don, Tony Peters. It was supposed to be Crunch, but we put Skyfire in there to give him the rub of wrestling the old time guys with the legends. So Ivan says, you got enough name recognition. If they're there, no one will worry about Paul Jones, Frank Dusek, and Chris Chavez. He says, take another blonde-headed kid if you got him, put him with Jackie Fulton, and just introduce him as the Fantastics. That's what we did. And guess what? Nobody missed Chris Chavez. and I've worked with Chris but you know what? Even if we could have got Chris wasn't coming. You know why? A week before this event, his first vignette shows up on Vince's TV.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
So we wouldn't have had him anyways.
Yeah.
So that day, we have wrestlers in the Walmarts in Kingsport. I'm at the Walmart that my mom works at, and Ivan is there, and I get to meet Ivan. And for the first time in person. And these people, I see these familiar faces, but I can't place them. But they come over to me and they said, hey, where do we set up our stuff? I said, who are you? Hey, we're the Fabulous Thunderbirds. You know us. It's a rip-off team of the Freebirds.
The Fabulous Thunderbirds. Nice.
Yes, the Thunderbirds, who are just going to show up and work because that's the way everybody here did it. I said, boys, I don't have any room for you. I don't have any spot for you. I've got nothing. I didn't call you. I didn't tell you to come. I got to go set the ring and stuff up and get ready for tonight. But you don't have a table here and you don't have a spot tonight. I got nothing for you. Boy, did I ever get cussed out right then and there. So get to the building. We're putting the ring up, doing the stuff, getting everything going. And I hear from the city that over 600 tickets have been sold in advance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Good job. A little pat on my back. Yeah. You can do this. You can do this.
Yeah.
So now I got the card and I got what I want to do. And I'm in the dressing room and I'm going through the finishes. I meet Tony P. Tony comes in and I shake his hand. And I overhear, as I'm yelling at somebody, I overhear Tony Peters ask Wayne Rogers and Don Wright, who is that kid? And they both kind of laugh and go, that's the boss. And Don Wright or Tony Peters says, I don't know about that, but he's got some balls. So I don't put it over, but I take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
You know, okay. So later in the night, Ivan Koloff has talked to me on the phone and met me in passing, but now he comes to the realization that this kid is the boss and is in control.
Yeah.
And he's watching me run this show and give finishes and talk to guys and laying it out. And hey, we're going to do this big angle because I've already booked this building to come back in 2 months. We're coming back here. This is August. We're coming back in October. So I always had a game plan. I've always had long-term vision from this point forward. From this day forward, we became the first steps of the dream and the realization that I had once we start. So I get to Ivan, and I'm not about to give Ivan Koloff a finish. Now, in years to come, I sure would.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving Ron and Don and Tony Peters a finish. So I'm going around them and they're like, what are we doing? And everything. So I get with them and I'm like, you tell me what we need to do. And I had been told by many outlaw talking heads to this point, you cannot beat the names. You have to put them over. If you bring them in, you can't beat them, blah, 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 blah. They won't do business. They won't do jobs. You can't beat the name. Why book a name you can't beat him? Well, here's the deal. They're going on say-so, falsehoods, and they're just too cheap to even try to book somebody or use somebody. They'd rather have a fake masked assassin and beat him instead of actually doing business with the real person. So, but I've been told this, and I believe it to be true. Again, the changing point of my life, August 1st, 1991. The only person that got on this show that was not booked was a referee who showed up. And he was on the very first Outlaw show that I had ever went to as a fan in 1987. His name was Junior Gibson. He knew as much about pro wrestling as you and I, John, know about brain surgery. He looked like he just crawled out from underneath a car at Goober's filling station. Just a hillbilly, just a freaking goof. But when I get to the building to help set up, he's there helping Jim Bell set the ring up already. I thought he came with Jim. So then he talks to me about being a referee. Well, I already have myself, Jim Bell, and another guy. I've already got 3 referees. I don't need a 4th referee. Rick Connors says, hey, let Junior ref. Junior won't, blah, blah, blah. Here's the problem. Outlaws would let anybody ref, which seems a great story for another day about one of the referees that I inherited when I started running that I will tell at another time. Make a mental note about that at some point. But I let him ref the opening match, and that's it. There's 1,262 paid people in this building. There is another 400 people that were either season ticket holders to the Fun Fest deal, because they used to sell you a ticket where you got to do everything.
Uh-huh.
Sponsor tickets that we traded for money. You know, you sponsor so much and you get so many tickets. Altogether, there's 1,600 people in the building, right at it. 1,262 paid. I'm 16 years old. I just have drawn the biggest independent house and the biggest wrestling house that this city has seen in a while.
Yeah.
I have Ivan Koloff. I have Ron and Don Wright. I'm running around trying to do all this stuff. Well, I get with Ivan about a finish. And he goes, well, who's over? Now, right then and there, I should have said, would you put him over? Because if I would have, it would have been great. And and knowing Ivan, he would have done it. But I've been told by these outlaws, no, he won't. I said, well, you, of course. Okay, so he goes through a little simple finish and gives it to me. I take a bump and he gets the chain. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I got it. I have to take it across to the other dressing room to crunch. Crunch, at this point, has been wrestling about 5 or 6 years. This is the biggest match of his life because it's the biggest crowd, and he's from just outside of Kingsport. So he's ready to give it his all. He's going to do everything. He's out there and he's fighting. And him and Ivan have a good match. We get to the finish to where I take a bump. False finish. I'm down. Crunch rolls Ivan up for a false finish. He's got him. Al distracts him. Al's managing Ivan, and then the chain, and then I get up for the 3 count after the chain. So I take a bump. When they do the false finish, Junior Gibson, the referee from the first match, this outlaw, grease monkey, no good SOB, slides in the ring and counts 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
As Ivan is kicking out and is kicked out. I'm laying there selling and I hear the 3 count and don't know what it just happened. I roll over, and when I roll over, Crunch and I are nose to nose on the mat. And I go, what happened? He goes, I don't know, but I'm getting the hell out of here. So Ivan is mad. He's kicking this referee and slaps him, and I'm on the floor scared. I'm terrified. Yeah. I'm 16. No, I just turned 17. I'm sorry. July 17th. 16, I got the show. I'm 17 by the time the show gets here. I am 2 weeks past my 17th birthday. I am got a turtle head poking out my butt because I'm about to poop myself. I'm so scared.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting ready to have to fight the Russian bear, Ivan Koloff.
Oh. So
Ivan comes back, and I don't know what to do. He's in the heel dressing room, and I'm afraid to go in there. I don't know what to do. So there's an incident going on with me and the stupid referee in the babyface dressing room, because I went in there and picked up one of those hard chairs like it's in a cafeteria, like you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, like the...
I picked it up and threw it as hard as I could throw it at Junior Gibson's head. I tried to kill him right there, and I cussed him. I cussed him for some stuff that I would become famous for years later, the way I used to yell at people. They became legendaries. I mean, I'm going nuts. He's a grown man. He had no fight in him. He's trying to tell me he did it by he's a mark. He's a freaking mark, John. He's telling me he did it by the rules. Because he's been allowed to be a part of these outlaw shows around here. Now, after I run him out of the building and threaten to kill him, I've now got to go face the Russian bear.
Oh dear.
And I am scared to death.
Yeah.
Now, before I get to the Russian bear, thank God Almighty for Ron Wright, Don Wright, Wayne Rogers, and Tony Peters, because they calmed him down.
Okay.
They got him, and they said, because he thought it was a double cross.
That's
And they're like, no, no. So they're just like, they're trying to explain what has happened. While that's going on, Jimmy McKeon, the other referee, when I threw the chair at Junior Gibson's head, he got out of the dressing room because he thought he may get it next or something. I don't know. He goes to the Hill dressing room and he tells them that I'm trying to kill Junior Gibson in the other dressing room. That helps my case with Ivan Koloff too.
yeah.
So now I got to go face him. So I go over to the hillside and I go right to him and I said, "Sir, I'm so sorry." And and he goes, "They've explained it." He goes, "Who was the guy?" And I explained it. He said, "I thought I was being double crossed." And he goes, "I would have did a job if you wanted me to do a job, I'd have lost." He said, "Valuable lesson right here. Anybody that's about business will do business." I would have put him over. So I said, "Listen, I'm coming back here in 2 months. I have the date. Will you come back and work with him again? We'll do this deal." And he said, "Let me look." He looks in his book. He goes, "I'm open." I said, "Write it down. We're right here. Same building." I said, same agreement? Yes. That began a 30-year working relationship with me and Ivan Koloff.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Frank Dusick is an asshole. But it also began a relationship with me and Ron and Don Wright and Tony Peters and Wayne.
Yeah.
I already had one with Wayne. Wayne was in the first match I ever refereed. But these are all dear people in my life. And again, this podcast will not be about me. There will be stories for me. We will have a segment every episode where I tell a story. But being this is the first one, it works out good this way because you people are hearing our qualifications of talking about these situations. So that's what leads us to the event of here, the Outlaw event, Southern States Wrestling. And I like to look at this event as the night that we turn from outlaw to independent. Because that October, 17 years old, John, I produced 2 hours of TV in October of that year.
Oh, wow.
I produced a pilot with Ivan Koloff's help. What I don't know and what is told to me the night that we shoot the thing in October is told to me by Ivan Koloff, because now he realizes he can trust us and me, and he realizes this is a place to work. And Ivan worked for me several times over the years. He pulls me off to the side and he says, "I don't know if you know this or not, but Jim Cornette's getting ready to try to open this back up as the territory." That's when I first heard about Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Wow.
And I said, "Ivan, I'm trying to do the same." I don't have Rick Rubin's money, though. And I'm just outlaw enough to run on the shoestring of shoestring businesses.
Yeah.
Here we are 33 years later.
Yeah, First show's 33 years ago this month, August, right?
Yeah. The first one we're covering. Our very first one was in February of '91, but this is the first big one. That's why I picked this one for our deal. Let me give you the rundown. Wrestlefest. I called it Wrestlefest because it was part of Fun Fest. Gotcha. John Sevier Middle School, which it was the old and original Dobbins Bennett High School. Lots of legendary names that already worked in that building, and Ron Wright used to run that building regular. Opening match, Jeff Tankersley beats the Terminator. Jeff, local guy, Kingsport guy. The Terminator was from Knoxville, came with Jim Bell in the ring. Tag team champions, the Christian brothers, Danny and Bam Bam Christian, that we just put in our Hall of Fame back in February. Beat a masked Sheik and the masked Scorpion. The masked Scorpion is Carol Dickerson. I'm still having to play that political game over that ring. Gotcha. But I'm getting ready to hand him 5 $100 bills that I work hard for and save up to get him out of my life. Outlaw Chick White, who we just put in the Hall of Fame, beat Tom Pittner. Tommy Pittner, Chick, great guys, great help to me over the years. Jamie Gibson beats George Hyatt. Stan Lee, Jackie Fulton, announced as the Fantastics, beat a set of Assassins. I wished I would have did something else, but this is the early days.
Yeah.
I use the assassin gimmick and a couple other gimmicks a little, maybe another 6-7 months, and then I just go, I ain't doing that no more. The Young Guns, Jeff Love and Scott Sterling, beat the Heartbreakers, which was Eddie Golden and Loverboy Lyons, with the Godfather, which is Carol Dickerson, without the mask on. Wayne Rogers, Tony Peters, Don Wright, managed by the legendary Ron Wright, beat Hoot Gibson, Rick Connors, and Skyfire. Then the Equalizer beats Ivan Koloff with a screwy referee situation, and Don Wright wins a 20-man battle royal. 1,262 paid, right at 1,600 in the building. I'm 17 years old. I have got a reputation as a kid with a mouth and a kid with some balls on him, and a guy that will not let you just show up and do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Which rubs the Outlaw boys every which away and leads to constant battles for the next several years. Oof. So, any questions out of the results?
No questions out of the results. A lot of I remember Wayne Rogers. I mean, I know he worked TV for Fuller and Crockett and Georgia TV. Is there a match, him and the Stomper, with you as referee? Have I seen that, or am I imagining?
Yes. That would be from my hometown. Yep, that was from 92, I believe.
Okay.
Wayne started with Ron Wright and Don Wright. They trained him. Okay. And then they gave him to Buddy Russell and Earl Walters. And when there'll be an episode where we cover Earl Walters and Buddy Russell, because they were an outlaw group, but worked with Ron Wright's office.
Okay.
And they were kind of the first developmental system for the little bitty towns in these mountains that Ron Wright couldn't take the TV crew to. He would give to Buddy and Earl, and then give them a headliner off of TV to run it. And then he would use talent. He would always ask the guy that came back, was there anybody there any good, worth using, we should use? That's how Wayne got it. Wayne then starts working here. He worked for Fuller. He worked in towns for Fuller. He was full-time for a while with Fuller. Fuller gets him to Charlotte. He works in Charlotte. There's a great little TV match of Wayne and Roddy Piper from Mid-Atlantic TV that somebody just put up a year or so ago on YouTube. Wayne worked in Atlanta. There's a match from Atlanta TV of Wayne and Carl Fergie floating around. He came back and worked Flair and Mulligan when they had taken over Knoxville. He worked there. So he was back and forth. He was a full-time wrestler from mid-'70s to mid-'80s. And then he came back home after Charlotte and then worked here And Wayne still wrestles a couple times a year.
Oh, wow.
He'll still have a match.
Huh.
But he was another one, tremendous help to me over the years. I think the world of him. And riding with him and Don Wright is like riding with an old married couple, the way they bicker and argue, and I laugh every trip I make with them. It's just great. So John, I believe we've covered what an outlaw is.
Yes.
We've covered how the territories looked at the outlaws. I have give you the cliff notes on a story of starting an outlaw and growing it. And we went through our segment of the match of the card of the month.
Yep.
So I think we have covered everything on the agenda. Anything you need to add to what we talked about so far?
No, I don't think. No, I think I'm
Okay.
I'm good. I'm good.
Well, in that case, then tell everybody what's on Charting the Territories with you and Al Getz and what's coming up on the next one.
Oh, Charting the Territories, our most recent episode just came out last week. We talked about Hawaii, 1971. And next month, we'll be talking about the Gulas Welch Territory in 1971. So we've got that to look forward to. Yeah, and after that, you have to tune in to see what we're doing next.
Al likes to be a little more organized than I do, but I like to call it in the ring. And Al likes to kayfabe more than a month out. He won't tell you what he's doing. He's afraid somebody's going to run opposition and give that same podcast before we get to him.
Good luck running opposition to Al. Good luck for anybody doing that. Good luck trying.
Especially in the work that he does. There's nobody that's going to do that.
No.
It's like I was accused of trying to steal a town in West Virginia not long ago. And I said, I gave that town away in 1996. I'm not going back. I know how that will end. I don't have any desire. I am doing the Bradshaw and Briscoe podcast. As we record this on a Sunday, I'm recording with them on Tuesday. So it should be out by around the same time this is. So check that out. I'm going to talk about Knoxville history, the battles leading to the war that led to Plan B, and the war that continued after Plan B.
Yeah.
It was not 79 and 80 war. There was a war in 63, 68, 70, 73, 74, 79 till 82.
Whew.
And most people do not realize that. And there's one person that flipped sides who went away to the evil and came back to the light in the story. So I'm excited about telling that. And I'm going to be real excited when the book comes out. The last Saturday night of every month, except July, because Fun Fest is going on, and we now do the part of Fun Fest at the fairgrounds. The beginning week of Fun Fest, but the last weekend of Fun Fest is the concerts and all that, so I don't run then. But the last Saturday night, Southern States Wrestling runs right outside of Kingsport, 1 mile from Kingsport, Mount Carmel, Tennessee, at the Armed Forces Reserve Center Armory. And that is a bunch of great young talent that we've got. Got some kids coming back from England that's going to be here this fall with us. We produced a new program called Legacy. A new episode comes out every Saturday on our Southern States channel. I'm always uploading classic matches and stuff for that. There is a Facebook page for this podcast being built now that should be, by the time this drops, you should be able to find it through my Facebooks and Twitters. And once a month, we're going to tell you about outlaws and independents. And John, tell them how to find you online if they want to find you.
Yeah, find me on Twitter. I'm on JON_BOUCHER. I post a lot of cool wrestling stuff, scans of old programs, photos, and that sort of stuff. So if you're into that, you might be into following me if you don't already.
Yes, I follow you and I enjoy it.
Yes. See?
So, so everybody else, I'm on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, King of King Sport, Facebook, Pro Wrestler Beau James. Like I said, there'll be a Facebook for this podcast coming. I'm on Instagram, King of King Sport, and I'm wrestling all over the place. Again, I was just telling John the other night, I thought when I came back from the pandemic and the health scare that if I could do 25, 30 matches a year, I will be happy. I've already surpassed that with a bunch more to go this year. So
and it's only August.
It's only August. I have between now and New Year's, I have 3 Saturdays that are not full, and I've got several Thursdays, Tuesdays, Fridays. So it's like the old times again. I'm back out there. So if I love this, and I get this more and more all the time, and I hope this brings a lot more. I just got it last night in West Virginia. A guy walked up to me, introduced himself. I said, "Nice to meet you." He said, "I love you on all the podcasts you do." Well, now I have my own podcast, so I hope you all love it just as much as I do and John does, and I hope you will see the work that we put into this, because wait till we get to Donald Van Fleet, because that's a lot of research that had to be done.
Yeah.
And a lot of other people. So you will see the amount of time and research we're spending looking for finding people. John found the papers of Donald Van Fleet fleeing Cuba to get away from Fidel Castro. So that tells you the kind of stuff and how deep we dig finding out information on people in these promoters. And a lot of these people are not accessible anymore. They passed away. A lot of people that work for them passed away, but it's an important part of pro wrestling history. It's an important part of my life. It's an important story that needs to be told. And that's what we're going to do each and every month right here. If you have not already, please subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend, tell a neighbor. If you enjoy it, tell them how much you love it. If you don't like it, keep your mouth shut, or I'll send John over to your house to take care of you. So
cracking my knuckles.
Crack those knuckles. That's it. When he cracks the knuckles, folks, I saw Bob Orton Jr. run off an elevator in fear, so I know what's coming. So, John, thank you. I think this has been great.
Yes.
Thank everybody for listening. Until next month. Goodbye, everybody.